I wasn't supposed to see her again, not without witnesses, paperwork, and fluorescent lights. But there she was, rain still threading from her hair into the collar of a blue coat, in the cramped aisle between poetry and urban planning, asking if we had an out-of-print anthology on our used shelf. "It's for June," she said, as if I didn't already know whose name we both carried around like a lantern. Her voice was lower than I remembered. Not softer, exactly. Eleanor Hart never did soft. But warmer, like a cello finding the note it had been circling all evening. "I can check the back," I managed. The words came out steadier than my hands. She noticed anyway. "Cass," she said, "I can come back another time." "It's fine," I said. And it was, and it absolutely wasn't. The bell above the door sighed as a pair of students left. The rain made a quiet curtain against the glass. Behind the counter, our chipped green mug held an army of plastic pens, none of which would write when a customer needed to sign a receipt. I went to the back room without looking at her again, because I knew if I kept looking, I would remember her hands, precise, watchful hands, and I would remember the last time those hands reached for mine. The last time had been 21 years earlier, when I was barely holding myself together, 2 days into a choice people called brave when they meant irreversible. Paper shuffled. A social worker cleared her throat, smelling of lavender lotion and long practice. Eleanor's hair had been darker then, a single silver thread at her temple, like a note held in a crowded room. She wore a blouse the color of fog and a tiny nick on her knuckle, as if a story had bitten her on its way out. When the folder came toward me, she was not the one who pushed it across the table. That was the social worker, but she was the one whose hands didn't shake. "Are you sure you don't want to hold her?" someone asked. "I can't," I said, and kept my eyes on the line where my name would stop being required and become instead an artifact. Eleanor didn't say anything. She didn't crowd me with gratitude. She didn't perform sadness. It was a steadiness I noticed even while I was coming apart. My signature looked like a storm taking a corner too fast. I set the pen down too carefully, as if it might bruise. "Thank you," the social worker said. Eleanor finally looked at me full, and I thought, this is a person who will look straight at the hardest thing and not flinch. "Her name?" she asked gently, as if the question itself might cut. I had chosen a name, something simple and bright. "June," I said, "if that's still all right." "It is," Eleanor said. And I wanted to hate her for sounding so sure, but all I felt was relief, the nasty, grateful kind. At the shop, I found the book on a misshelved cart, yellowed spine, margin notes in an earnest hand. I thumbed the first page, and there it was, a poem about naming things and letting them go. I almost laughed. When I came back, Eleanor was standing in front of the staff picks wall, reading the cards as if they were editorials. She turned at the sound of my steps. If she was surprised I'd found the book, she didn't show it. "You always did know where to look," she said, as if we were in the middle of a conversation, and in a way we were. 21 years is just a long comma. I shrugged, bat the book down between us. "It's $20, I said. "We don't haggle." "Wouldn't dream of it." She reached for her wallet, then paused. Would you have time for coffee across the street?" "If that's not intrusive." A tiny laugh escaped me. "Is this what we're calling it now?" "What would you call it?" "Complicated," I said, because honesty always comes out sideways with her. "But yes, I have 15 minutes. We stood under my one working umbrella, a black canopy with a stubborn hinge, our shoulders careful not to touch. Across the street, the cafe's windows steamed. I watched our reflection slide over parked cars and thought of all the times I'd rehearsed this. Different words, different weather, never the same woman. At a table by the window, she took out her press badge while she dug for money. The laminate scuffed, the photo a decade and a half too young. Editor-in-Chief, The City Ledger. The title felt like her. Relentless and exact. She ordered tea. I ordered coffee. We both knew would be terrible. I didn't come to your shop by accident, she said, once we were alone again. June asked for that anthology for a class. I could have ordered it online. She wrapped her hands around the paper cup. She mentioned you. She didn't say much. She's careful with me when it comes to you. I didn't push, but when she said where you worked, you decided to commit a minor ambush. If you asked me to leave, I would have. She held my gaze. I need you to know that. It was astonishing how good it felt to be looked at without apology. It's all right, I said. You have every right. I don't, she said quickly. I have a daughter. I have love that makes me take stairs slower when she's below me, and buy the expensive sunscreen because she never remembers. I don't have rights where you're concerned, not any automatic ones. Careful, I thought. We were always so careful, mostly because of what would happen if we weren't. I'm not a bomb, I said lightly. No, she said. You're the person who made me a mother. That's different. There it was, the thing I both wanted and couldn't take. So this is coffee, I said. What do we talk about, weather? I gestured toward the window. The rain had thickened. The streetlights a low gold haze. Post-its? Your newsroom's obsession with verbs? We should talk about June, she said, and the shape of my name and her voice made something in me real. She's 22. She thinks she's older than the sun. She's not wrong. Eleanor's smile was slow to appear, then bright like a secret getting air. She wants to see you again. On her terms, not as a revelation in a coffee shop, I promise. My chest went tight. I saw her last year, I said. Briefly. She was the one who wanted it. That's not... We didn't build a habit. I know. She told me it felt like trying on a dress that belonged to someone she didn't know how to be. Too big here, too tight there. That's... I stopped, afraid of saying tender where it was already tender. Accurate. If you're open to it, she said, we'd like to try again. Slower. A dinner that doesn't require anyone to explain everything. You can say no. I can, I said. Saying no would be the cautious thing, the careful thing. I'd promised myself I would always pick careful. Do you still cook on Sundays? Her mouth tilted. When I can bully the week into it. I could bring bread, I said, and then I was already inside the possibility, breaking it open and testing the heat. We started with dinners because there wasn't another honest way. The first one was messy. Eleanor made lemon chicken and overcooked the rice. June arrived late, breathless, hair damp from a rush through drizzle. She lifted a hand in an approximate wave. Hey, she said to me, and pretended to tie her shoe so she wouldn't have to hug me, and I pretended to have no idea, which is a kind of love if you do it right. Bread, I said, shaky with the effort of being normal. From the market on K. It's obscene. Then we must eat it out of spite, Eleanor said, and June saved a grin for her mother that I tried not to count. We talked about small things first. I learned that June was writing a paper on the economics of food trucks in the district and pretended, poorly, that I had opinions. She learned I worked at Dog-Eared Books and 2 nights a week at a ceramics studio where I made lopsided bowls and a mess. The dog nosed my knee and decided my lap was public good. Eleanor topped off my water without asking. She did it like she'd done it for years. The second dinner was easier, which meant it was quieter. June told a story about a protest she'd covered for her student newspaper. Eleanor corrected the name of a council member twice in a row, and June didn't bristle, which startled me because I remembered being 22, and bristling was my default. After they'd both cleared places like a well-rehearsed duet, I stood in the kitchen holding the offending bread knife as if I'd never seen one before. Eleanor reached past me for the dish towel, our shoulders brushed. I stepped back, not because I didn't want to be that close, but because I did. Sorry. Don't be, she said. Then, lighter, I hear, apology is contagious. We were both trying too hard to be human around each other, making mistakes and not editing them out. June wandered in, knotted a dishcloth, threw it over a chair back, and fled again with the social grace of a cat. We laughed in the same breath. Do you remember? Eleanor started, then cut herself off. I do, I said, because how could I not? The paper, her careful hands, the name that still tasted like honey and regret. After the third Sunday, June texted me a picture of the dog asleep on the couch, paws up, belly exposed like a question. He trusts you, she wrote, and then, I do, too. Mostly. I stared at the words. The way mostly hung there, like a loose thread you were allowed to leave alone if you wanted the sweater to keep working. I typed and deleted for an hour, then sent, I don't need more than that. I didn't say, I don't deserve more than that. I didn't say, I'm still figuring out what I deserve. We drifted toward each other the way people do when the thing they shouldn't want is the one sturdy thing in the room. Sometimes it was practical. Eleanor's car wouldn't start. I had cables I never used because I didn't own a car. I stood in the cold with my fingers numb inside cheap gloves and watched her arrange our hoods like they were paragraphs. When the engine caught, the relief made me laugh harder than it deserved. You okay? She asked, close enough that I could smell her shampoo, non-committal citrus. Just entertained by my own competence, I said. You always did have it, she said, even when you couldn't afford to admit it. Other times, it wasn't practical at all. A late-night text. Did you ever read The Poet Who Left Everything Unfinished on Purpose? And I would be half asleep, my phone face down, then suddenly awake and writing back before I knew what I was saying. If I wished for more, I didn't name it. Wishes are best when they stay feral. I didn't tell anyone. It felt as private as breath. Also, it felt impossible in a way that made keeping it ours the only way to bear it. Then one night, after a long rain, power flickered and surrendered. June was at her girlfriend's. The house was a study in dim, the kind of dark that asks you to listen for what you want. We lit candles like we were rehearsing an old ritual. The dog slept on my feet. Eleanor's playlist clicked and stopped. We learned that quiet had been arriving all along. We could wait to clean up, she said. Nothing stains lemon. I leaned against the counter and let a drip from the cabinet hit me like punctuation. You're an optimist now? Only about citrus. She dried her hands and didn't put the towel down. Cass. Eleanor said my name like a bridge she trusted. I could have walked across it blind. If this is where you tell me we should keep everything exactly as it is, because change is the enemy of equilibrium, I said. I'll agree, and then walk into the river. I was going to say I'm afraid, she said, hushed, and that I regret very few things in my life, but I would regret not saying this. I want to be with you. Not because of history, not because you gave me a daughter, because when you look at the same street I look at, I understand it better. Because watching you laugh has been the best thing that's happened to my kitchen in a decade. I swallowed. It sounded like a confession and a thesis, the kind you defend in public. I'm afraid too, I said. It feels like I'm trespassing in a house I built, but never got to live in. You built a door, she said. Come in. She was so still. She was so careful with me, I could have cried. We stood with the dog snoring and the candles throwing soft geometry across her face. She stepped close enough that I could count her eyelashes, close enough that I could see the fine line where silver threaded her hair at her temple. If we do this, she said, we do it like grown people who know where the cracks are. And we tell June, I said, because if we didn't, the house would tilt. Yes, she said, immediate. She waited then, and the waiting was its own kind of touch. May I? I nodded, and everything else went mercifully quiet. Her mouth found mine the way some people find home. Gradually, at first, then all at once. We were patient and clumsy and accurate. When she pressed her forehead to mine, I could feel her smile. Tell me to stop if you want, she whispered. I don't, I said, sure all the way down. Not at all. We didn't sleep much. The storm went somewhere else. The power returned without fanfare. In the blue hour before the city stirred, I watched Eleanor pour coffee with a care that felt like a vow. Telling June did not go well. Eleanor wanted to do it together at the kitchen table, where most of their difficult conversations had happened. I wanted to do it somewhere with exits. We compromised on the living room, where the dog could choose which of us to pity. We explained ourselves in neat, terrible sentences, like people leaving voicemails they had rehearsed. We promised respect. We promised slowness. We did not promise we would get it right. At first, June's face didn't change at all. It was the mask she used when a story made her furious and she hadn't decided what to do about it. So you're... what? She asked finally, looking between us. Dating? I don't know, I said. I'm learning the word for it. Yes, Eleanor said firmly, because she always had a word. We're dating. June's laugh came out like a hiccup. Of course you are. Oh my God. She stood up like the floor had overheated. Do you hear yourselves? Do you hear me? How are you supposed to be the person I go to when I can't stand one of you? Because that's how this works, by the way. Moms are checks on each other. How am I supposed to be in the middle of this without being in the middle of this? The dog lifted his head, unsure. Eleanor started toward her, then stopped, like she'd run into a glass door. You aren't in the middle, I said, hating how false it sounded even though it was true when I meant it. You are the center of our respect, but you're not our referee. I'm not your referee, June repeated. Great. So, shall I call you both when I get a byline and we'll celebrate as a throuple? She flinched at her own word. I can't do this. I can't. This is me, do you know that? It's my origin story. You're messing with it. With me. She pressed her hands to her face, and I remembered them as a child's, gripped like a small hawk, and then as a teenager's, flinging themselves wide and back to her sides like she was conducting a symphony only she could hear. We can take space, Eleanor said quietly, voice threaded with panic she wouldn't show. We can slow down more. We will. I don't want your schedule, June said. I want my life not to be a headline. You're my mother's. You're not each other's. That's weird. That's wrong. She shook her head hard, as if to force a better idea forward. I'm going to Alina's. She grabbed her coat and keys and then turned to me unexpectedly. Don't leave, she said, and in her voice was a plea, a reprimand. A child, an adult. Then she was gone, the door shutting like a book. Eleanor sat very carefully. The dog came and leaned his weight against her knee. I stared at the window, the street outside gray with January. I could feel the old guilt run through me, eager to reclaim turf, and I let it wash right over me. I had practiced this fight too. "Are you going to tell me I ruined everything?" I asked quietly. "No," she said. "That is the one sentence you are never allowed to say about yourself where I'm in the room." "We might have," I said, or we might have just changed it in a way she didn't get to choose. "She didn't get to choose a lot of things," Eleanor said, which was a fact and a wound. We took a week without seeing each other. It felt like holding my breath in a grocery store line waiting for the person ahead of me to remember they needed eggs. I went to work, wrapped books in brown paper, rinsed clay from my hands, and didn't text her even though I wanted to, with a frequency that would have embarrassed me at 21. Then June called. "Can you meet me?" she asked. "No, Eleanor, just you." We met at the conservatory on the hill because it was warm and smelled like dirt, and the plants didn't care if you cried as long as you didn't water them with salt. She wore a red scarf I recognized as her mother's and her girlfriend's boots. She looked like the exact age she was, new, brave, tired. "I was mean," she said without preamble, which I respected. "I mean, mean is one word, honest is another, but I made it about you being wrong because I didn't want to say what it felt like." "What does it feel like?" I asked, because I had grown up enough to let someone tell me the worst thing. "Like you're taking my mother," she said, "and like she's taking you from the place where I kept you. And like neither of you is thinking about what it does to the way the story in my head goes, because I've been telling it a long time and it has kept me aligned. You're the person who made a decision and then left. She's the person who stayed." Her face crumpled, then uncrumpled. "This changes that, and I don't know what it changes it to." I sat down on a bench, scrolled with metal vines, and the conservatory air kissed my face, damp and forgiving. "It changes it to a truth I grew into slowly," I said. "I didn't leave because I didn't want you. I left because wanting you wasn't the same as being able to hold you right. Your mother, Eleanor, built the house you needed." I stood outside and looked in the windows a lot. Not literally, I added, because humor sometimes catches you as you fall. "She isn't taking me anywhere you can't find me, but you get to tell us how to make it easier to see you from where we stand." June sat beside me with a sigh that sounded like it had been waiting on deck. "It's so freaking vulnerable to say what I need," she muttered. "I will not make a joke," I promised, "even though I'm very good at them." She took a breath, like a person deciding to learn to swim. "Okay. First, I don't want to be surprised by affection in our house. If you're together, be together, but tell me before I walk in. Second, I don't want to be the messenger. You tell her things, she tells you things. Not me carrying water between two people over 40. "I'm 42, I said, because accuracy felt like a humble offering. "Congrats," she said, and we both laughed. Third, when we do things, all three of us, I want them not to be about this. No relationship panels. I want to go to the farmer's market and talk about peaches and argue about which food truck has the better empanadas. Fourth, if I say I need one of you alone, the other one makes herself scarce without sulking." "Eleanor doesn't sulk," I said reflexively. "She sulks in Helvetica," June said. "Subtle but lethal." She scrubbed her eyes with her knuckles. "And last, I don't want to call what you are anything for a while. Not to my friends, not out loud. It's too many labels on one shelf." "I can do that," I said. "I can do all of that." I reached over and laid my hand open on the bench between us. It took a minute, a whole long minute, and then she set her hand in mine as if place were a verb we were both allowed to conjugate. "When I was little," she said, "I used to think about you as somebody in the next room behind a door I couldn't open. Then I grew up and the door appeared and it was unlocked and I was scared. Now it's like there are two doors and they both open into the same hallway and it's my hallway. And that is a lot. I can be the person who leaves her shoes outside," I said. And she snorted, grateful. We walked the rest of the conservatory and named plants we didn't know. She asked if Eleanor was as wrecked as she was pretending not to be, and I said yes, and we didn't call her right then because we weren't ready to make the good thing harder by asking it to be complete. Eleanor and I resumed in a lower gear. We told June before we touched each other in front of her, which meant a lot of quick texts. Headed home, hugging may occur. That made me feel like a teenager sneaking decency past a chaperone. Care made the desire better. It didn't blunt anything. It sharpened it like letting a blade meet stone until both understood the other. We had nights, sometimes hers, sometimes mine, the dog allowed by special dispensation that made him believe he had a union. We cooked together and got the rice right 1 out of 3 tries. We argued about which metro station smelled like warm pennies and which smelled like despair. We told each other the ugly parts of our histories without making them currency. "I was never angry with you," Eleanor said once, the ceiling fan whispering above us. "Not in the way people expected. I was frightened that you would change your mind and the ground would go liquid under my feet. And then when you didn't, I was frightened that I would wreck the promise you gave me, that I would be not enough." "You were enough," I said. "You are." She reached for my hand. "I did read every letter you sent through the agency," she said, almost sheepish. "God," I moaned. "Those letters were like puzzles I wrote to myself." "I know," she said softly. "I learned to read them. I put them in order. You told me about a scar on your knee from a fall, and I bought extra Band-Aids. For no one." I kissed the heel of her hand. "I wrote too carefully," I admitted. I was terrified my heart would show. "It did," she said, just on tiptoe. We went slowly, not because we had to, but because we finally could. The urgency that had dogged my 20s, the need to prove, to insist, to hurl myself forward in case the door shut, had eased into something steadier. The distance between our ages felt less like a gap and more like a place we could meet with a picnic. "I like your laugh," I told her once at the market, sun indolent and kind. It always lands a second after the joke, like it's any editor worth her salt, forcing a rewrite. "I like your hands," she said, tracing a finger along the ink that never quite left my knuckles. "They're honest." We were happy in a way that didn't erase the parts that could still hurt. There were days when June was thin with us and then, without warning, generous. There were days when she was both at once. She asked me to teach her to center a lump of clay, and we ruined 3 wheels and a shirt. She asked her mother to read an essay before she handed it in, and then didn't follow a single suggestion, which made Eleanor incandescently proud. We were, slowly, making a way. Spring slid in sideways, all water and magnolia. The city smelled like last year's leaves learning math. June graduated in a white dress that made her look older than me and younger than Rain, which seemed right. We sat on either side of her girlfriend and clapped like a small army. Eleanor wore a suit the color of late sky and squeezed my hand accidentally on purpose during the speech. After, we took too many photos and exactly the right number of breaths. When people asked who we were, June said, "My mother's," with a defiance that was also joy. I tried not to sob. I failed. The dog wore a bow tie and ruined everything with his perfection. Later that night, the three of us sat on the stoop with strawberries in a bowl, in the kind of tired that feels earned. "Thank you," June said suddenly, urgent, "for not making me a bridge, for letting me be a person with two shores." "We're just upkeeping the river," Eleanor said, which was the corniest thing I had heard her say, and I loved her so much for it I could barely stand it. June bumped her shoulder into mine, then into Eleanor's. "I still don't want to know details," she warned. "Which details?" I asked, because it's fun to get scolded by your adult child when it's about your sex life. "Chaos," Eleanor said, mock stern. "Right," I said, "no details." We fell into the kind of silence people pay money to learn how to make. Fireflies started up like they had been listening for their cue. Somewhere down the block, someone burned something they were pretending was intentional. The dog sighed the sigh of a creature convinced he had arranged everything. I thought of that first day in the hospital, of the line where my name stepped back and another name stepped forward. I thought of the way love had taught me to live with absence without making it a shrine. I thought of a kitchen in the dark and a slow, careful kiss. June cleared her throat. "So, empanadas. I've been testing various trucks. I have a ranking." "Of course you do," I said. As Relief stepped down off its chair and sat politely on the floor. "And the peaches this year?" Eleanor asked. "I smell an argument." "Good," June said, deadpan. "Finally, conflict I can handle." We laughed, and it didn't feel like we were laughing at the end of something hard. It felt like we were laughing in the middle of something curious and alive. Later, when June went inside to fetch the dog's forgotten leash, Eleanor leaned over. "I love you," she said simply, the way certain words only sound right when the room is as ordinary as it can be. I felt the old fear out there, patient as weather. I also felt the new thing that had edged it aside. Not bravado, not certainty. Willingness, not to deserve or prove or apologize, but to stay. "I love you too," I said. "And I still have that awful anthology you bought. I'm going to insist on reading to you out loud until you cry." "You already do that," she said, smiling. "And I haven't cried yet." "There's time," I said. "We have time." She slipped her hand into mine and left it there, as if we had been practiced at it for decades. And, in a way, we had. Not like this, not openly, but the choreography of care, of taking turns at the hard parts, of setting down blame like a heavy bag at the curb, that we had been rehearsing since a day under fluorescent lights, when we were both, without knowing it, saying yes to the rest of our lives. That summer, June got an internship at a radio station, and Eleanor started leaving sticky notes on the fridge with jokes the interns made that she pretended not to find funny. I took a second shift at the ceramics studio when the old teacher had her knee replaced, and we made bowls that looked like galaxies and cups that still leaked on principle. On Sundays, we met at the farmer's market and argued about peaches like we had promised. A woman asked if we were sisters and then frowned, recalculating. "We're family," I said, and June added, "The messy kind." And Eleanor, who never missed an opportunity, said, "The best kind." There were moments that still caught. A song came on at the grocery store with a melody that's just ribs learning to ache, and I had to stand in the laundry detergent aisle because memory had ambushed me with a handful of snow. Eleanor found me and stood the way you stand, next to someone without asking for anything. June sent a text, Are we okay? On a day we had been nothing but okay, because the old map still tugged her toward edges. We turned our phones into flags that said yes a dozen ways. The taboo never disappeared. We didn't need it to. We didn't smooth the wrinkle out of the shirt. We learned to wear it knowing other people would stare, and some would understand, and some wouldn't. We were not an object lesson. We were a household that learned where to put the shoes. On the first truly hot night in August, we brought the cheap fan into the bedroom and drank water like we were working on an assembly line. Eleanor traced the scar on my knee, the one she had bought Band-Aids for a lifetime ago, and I watched her look at it with a tenderness that made me want to rearrange the furniture of my fear. I let it happen. "Do you ever think," I said into the dark, "about the moment you almost didn't say yes?" "Yes," she said. "And then I think about this moment, and the next, and the one after that." "Good editor instinct," I said. "Always go to the next sentence." She laughed, that late arriving laugh I'd grown greedy for. Outside, a siren threaded through the city, all urgency and proof of life. Inside, we were just ourselves, two women with a history, a kitchen with resistant rice, a daughter who kept teaching us how to love her. When morning came, June texted a photo of a sunrise through the radio station window, captioned, "Everything's both and." It felt like permission. It felt like the only prayer I knew how to say. I sent back a peach emoji and a heart because I have learned not to say too much when the sentence is already perfect. Eleanor sat up, hair fingerprinted by sleep, and reached for the chipped green mug she had stolen from the bookstore the day we decided to be unafraid. She caught me looking. "What?" she asked, amused. "Nothing," I said. Then changed my mind the way you change your mind about keeping the good napkin in a drawer. "Everything, yes." She leaned across the messy sheets and kissed me hello, and the day started, as days do, with small choices you make until they add up to a life.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.